Hey everybody, Future Patrick here. I just wanted to let you know that this very special episode of the podcast had an error with Patrick's microphone. I've done what I can to repair it in post, but Patrick's going to be a little bit quieter than the rest of the group. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for listening.
Well, he said he started in his 30s, and it's been
39.
5 years.
39?
Oh,
dude, you do not look 39. You look like 31,
It's because
32.
it's all the and all this exercise, and then the life that it gives me to talk about Quest 64 every day.
Welcome to AnythingCast. I'm Patrick. This is Eric. Today on the show, we have with us Mike of Quest 64 fame. Mike, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, was that the intro,
Thank
actually?
you for having me.
That was a long, mumbly intro. You're going to edit a lot out of that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I'll edit whatever I want, Eric. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
It's way better like this.
Yeah, it is. It is way better like this.
Yeah.
So, Mike, why Quest 64? What was the spark of the love for Quest 64?
I'm sure I've probably told this story on the internet enough times where some people have heard it, but I live in Wisconsin, and we have a really good retro video game scene here. We have like 3 really solid, like mom and pop style video game stores, and I was the only one who liked Quest 64, and it became a running gag on all of our local Facebook groups for games and in the stores that I was the only one who liked it. So then I decided to take that personally, and I would go around to the stores with all my buddies owned, and I would just continually buy all of it. I'm like, you're right. There's only one person that likes it, and I'm like. And then I would they had wait lists, like, text message, and I would sign myself up for all the wait lists. So then I was the only one that would get text messages for Quest. And it just went on like this for, I would say 5 years or so of just turning their one joke into my entire personality locally. I
appreciate that autistic, nerdy dedication there. That is amazing.
Yeah, it's my favorite game. I've liked it since the 90s. I rented it a bunch of times, and my mom got sick of me renting it and her paying for it. So then she bought it, and we owned it, and I had a great time. It was, I don't know. It's probably some weird combination of nostalgia plus a void of Quest 64 on the internet, plus the way people have treated it online that made me decide that I was going to jump over the cliff holding nothing but Quest 64 and see what came out when I hit the ground.
He's the champion, the underdog. People want to root for him.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say he's not. You cannot say he's not the champion and the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
When you said we kept renting it, and then my mom got, I swear to God, I thought you were going to go into the Fresh Prince intro. And the whole
my mom
thing
got
was just
scared.
Be a lie,
Yeah.
And you were just playing up the whole time. I was like, God damn it, he got us. So Quest 64 is a very unloved game in the retro scene. Are you the only person you've ever run into that's just like, yeah, it's my favorite game?
I'm not, but I was for a long time. So the Facebook group that I admin is like 160,000 people, and maybe 5 of them like Quest, and everybody else subscribes to the. It's terrible. All I've heard for the last 10 years was how bad it was, but a lot of them just haven't played it. And that's the thing with the Twitter account is I'm around to just ask people like, why don't you just try to play it? Like, why don't you just play the game and then tell me that you hate it? Or and most people come back saying, wow, that's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's not my favorite game, but it's not as bad as I've heard. And that happens. That's a pretty recurring theme. It happens over and over. I made Greg, one of the local store owners who was part of the whole original joke, play it live on Saturday for his Extra Life for Charity stream. Well, Jared was in the chat, and he's one of the people notorious for dumping on the game.
Yeah.
And as Greg was playing, he's like, everybody say such things about this game. I actually really enjoy this. I might have to buy a copy now. I'm like, you hearing that, Jared? Listen, this is what you did. You're just brainwashing all of these people, and now I have to go one at a time on live streams and fix it. And I don't have enough time in my life for this.
I watched the when I realized what the meat of the subject matter was. I actually I did a quick search on YouTube because I was like, I know I've heard of Quest 64 several times, and I actually picked the completionist video on it. And he actually said that he said it was not nearly as bad as everyone keeps saying. It's actually pretty enjoyable, he says, at least for the first half. Started to run dry for him for like near the end, but he was just like, yeah. His recommendation at the end was play it. Like, he didn't say complete it. He was just like, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah, Gerard's video was great. I'm friends with him on Twitter too. But that's what I was. So now I'm encouraging a bunch of new people. Like every time I make a friend on Twitter, it does videos. I'm like, just do if you do the quest video, I'll promote it for you, and just make sure it's honest. That's all. I mean, that's all I want is just
hey, that's
tell me
fair.
that you played the game. Like
I like old RPGs,
and it's gone really well.
I always have.
Yeah.
You know, I've never been super good at them, but like I always liked dicking around with them. They're good time sink. You know, a lot of them, you know, have plenty of interesting shit. Like I have tried like all the original like Final Fantasy games when they were available on like ROMs or Game Boys on my computer and whatnot. I would only play them for like 5 or 6 hours because then like play something else and then go back to it and be like, oh, what the fuck was I doing?
Well, that's a good thing. If you play Quest enough times, 6 hours is enough to beat it. So or 6 to 10 hours. And there's no tutorial at the beginning. There's no big long like opening cutscene. They just dump you in. They're like, all right, go save the world, buddy. Bye. And so you can just jump in and finish the game in 2 days and then move on with your life. And that's, that's why it's the pitch is so easy for me. I'm like, go play it. And they're like, how far am I? I'm like, oh, about halfway. And this is the same day that they asked me. So,
See, my nostalgia is Devil May Cry, Onimusha, and the Metal Gear series. Those are the ones that I can like pop in and play from like beginning to end and go straight to the like objectives, grab all the secret guns and like, jump straight on it without skipping a beat. So
Did you own Did you own an N64 era?
I actually never owned an N64. My mom, I've said this before on the podcast, did not understand what third-party licensing rights were. And so she saw that like the same game was out for multiple systems and just didn't understand how first-party titles work. And so I didn't get to play the Marios or the Sonics. All I had was the PlayStation 1.
Oh, yeah.
Which isn't a terrible, system to start with. It had plenty of great games on it. But I was denied a lot of the other nostalgic stuff from the 90s. And I did go back later and, play more Game Boy and original NES things occasionally. As I said, I went through all the old Final Fantasies and the like, and I thought they were all good. My failing was not like finishing them or like remembering where the fuck I was. It was never the game's fault. Yeah, it was my amount of like time sink and all that kind of stuff. They were all interesting and cool and fun.
Yeah.
I have an appreciation. I just am not super duper experienced in a lot of it. But I also love James Rolfe and all that. I've been following, I've seen a lot of Pro Jared stuff back when he was more popular.
Don't say such cruel things about my man Jared.
Which is ironic because his stuff is so much better now. It doesn't matter if he's more popular now. Now his stuff is actually like watchable. It's not.
Ooh, hot take from Mike there. Wow.
Everybody's so cruel to
He
Jared.
knows how I feel. He said how much he hates his like older stuff when we were talking the other day. I'm like, that's everybody. So I'm glad that you can recognize that. Everybody likes your stuff better now that you're not on Nickelodeon and ripping on games like AVGN all day long. I'm like, be, a normal dude like the rest of us.
That was the
move on.
That was the style at the time. I believe was to just like, be loud and obnoxious and really rip into this old game for whatever reason, Tell everyone why it actually sucks, and then be really like animated.
Very much so.
All that good stuff.
This game ran over my dog and then took the body and put it in a trunk and then took it to my grandma's house and put fireworks in it on the front lawn.
Killed my grandmother.
All in the name of Brave Fencer Musashi.
Yeah. The only person who can get away with that these days is James. Like that most of that has kind of died off now. Like if you're not like still following the nerd, then no one's making any new content in that.
Internet culture has changed.
Oh, and like I talked about RGT 85, and he just made his Quest video 3 months ago in that style, and that was great. That was why I loved it so much. I'm like, oh man, you're going to get drugged for this and I'm going to be part of it. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to have such a great time together. And that's what happened.
So why is there such a big retro scene where you're at? I know that there's a big arcade scene in Illinois, and Wisconsin's right next to Illinois, right? Am I an idiot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
No.
Are those do those play together at all?
I think it's more just that we don't have anything else to do here. We also have the Midwest Gaming Classic is in Milwaukee, which is a really huge gaming convention in the area. Well, it's obviously it's all of the Midwest, but and we have huge pinball associations. We have groups of guys that all own pinball machines and go around and do tournaments in each other's houses and get. There's just nothing else to do here. We play video games and we play video games and get drunk. 4 months out of the year, we can't leave the house. So then you got to play games online or have retro games to play.
If you're not out there hunting moose, you're playing video games pretty much.
It ends up being a really cool, it's like the biodome of video games here. All the stores are within 20 minutes of me too. They're dead center. And then in Milwaukee, the bigger cities, they have another 10 or 15 stores that are really decent. So.
I can see why that cultivates that atmosphere.
What are we missing here, Eric? What are we why do we not have? Have you ever been to Mississippi, Mike?
I haven't.
I think I could quote it best as saying it's kind of like the Afghanistan of the United States.
But I get what you're saying is everything seems to be very. So I had friends that lived in Missouri, and we were in Missouri, and here in Wisconsin, you can buy cheese. And I have noticed that I can't buy cheese when I leave the state. It's, craft cheese you can get craft singles, you can get shredded cheese. But when I say that we can buy cheese, I can go to the gas station down the street and they have an artisanal cheese section with a bunch of local cheeses.
Son of a bitch.
So, I mean, when I leave this, and we have cheese curds, fresh cheese curds. I don't know if you ever had a fresh cheese curd. That's apparently a thing here only.
I've had a fried cheese curd.
Okay, so it's sort of the same, but they're they literally were made 2 hours previous in the morning, and they're squeaky and they're warm still, and it's still cheese and all that stuff. All the things that I like around here leave as soon as I leave the state. So I understand that I can't ever leave here. All of this Quest stuff falls apart when I leave the state too, because it's probably
you can't be the Quest 64 guy in the Deep South. Is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they won't think half of my memes are funny. I guarantee you. So.
What do we have like that here, Eric? What is a thing that you could walk down to any gas station and buy?
That's actually very easy because the person I had a friend come down from New York. It was with my younger brother through the Marine Corps. They were both buddies through the Marine Corps, and his buddy was from New York, and his family was actually from fucking Romania or something. He wasn't
the old country.
So he came down here. And one, he was freaked out because people keep striking up conversations randomly in public. And he's like, "Did you know that guy?" I was like, "No." I was just talking to him. We were standing in line at the gas station. Why not? Yeah. I guess that's kind of a South thing.
Yes.
But no. The other thing is you can get legitimately bomb-ass fried chicken at every other gas station in the South.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's definitely what
it is. True.
I was thinking a gun.
I don't think I've ever been to a gas station where you can buy a gun. No.
Can you buy bullets at a gas station?
I
don't feel like you could.
Think I've ever seen it. No, but they all are often knives and stuff at the bigger gas stations.
That's true,
big folding knives and sheath knives and random shit. I'm just like, how do you need knives?
We're a hunting state, so we have every gas station has a sporting goods store across from it, so we don't need to have the knives and the guns in the gas station.
Yeah.
That's where you buy the beer, and then you go across the street and buy the gun, and then you go home. So,
there's a lot of hunters here too, but...
Are you one of the states where your Walmarts carry guns?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ours is too. I feel like sometimes when I talk to people, I have to get a good gauge of how many Mississippis we're working with for their state. Florida is 75 3/4 of a Mississippi.
But we are also an open carry state, so you do occasionally in our Walmart see people with holstered guns just walking around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did they get that up there too?
So I would say Mississippi and Wisconsin is pretty close 1-to-1 with most things.
Let's be completely honest here. This fanny pack.
What have you got in your fanny pack? What are you about to show Mike? I don't like this.
Well.
What?
It's Mississippi, man. It's part.
My man has got.
I literally live in a house in the woods with 5 dogs. There's deer. There's a lake in the back.
You're not talking into your microphone, Eric.
There's snakes all the time.
Oh, we can hear him though.
There's snakes and shit all the time. I've only killed a couple every now and again, but I always keep one.
But how many men have you killed on your property, Eric?
None. But there was a trespasser one time, and the first time.
Ahead. Go, please. I'm
The first time I saw him, I didn't know who the fuck he was, and we had just had a cousin over who was a skinny guy with a bunch of tattoos, and I saw some skinny guy with a bunch of tattoos over across the lake while me and my brother were walking with a dog. It's funny because he had a spear in his hand. My brother did.
Oh, okay.
And I just looked over at him and was just like, "Hey, watch out! The snakes have been really bad this year." Because I just thought he was fishing while he was visiting. There's a lake there. Why not fish? Made sense to me. And then Alex just who the fuck was that? I was like, I'm not actually very sure. I think it was our cousin maybe, but I didn't really recognize him, but I don't know that guy very well. So next day, I walk the dog in the morning, and another random dog comes up to me, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? So I put my dog back inside and follow that dog, and I'm just like, hey dog, bring me back to your person. And it did. It brought me back to the edge of the lake, and that same guy was down there. And at the time, I had a fanny pack on because I was going to work. So I wasn't showing anything, so to speak.
Yeah, you weren't brandishing a firearm in this poor man's face.
No, and I was actually polite to him because I was like, lake, woods, back Mississippi. I was like, okay, you are trespassing, but, just leave. Just leave. And quite frankly, we're not, ridiculously hostile people. If you're really into it, go back around down the driveway and knock on the door of those old folks over there and ask permission to, go in the lake. If the grandpappies say that you're fine, then I don't care or whatever.
Yes.
I'm not really that into it right now, so you got to go. So he left. He left with his dog. And then when I got back home, I told my wife and everything, and she was just like, well, there's no way he's actually back out there again or anything like that. I was like, yeah, but part of me just wants to check. So I holstered 2 pistols on the outside of my belt and strapped a 12 gauge shotgun and a 3-point sling over my chest. And then I walked out there with my dog, and lo and behold, he was right there again. And I said, I talked to the grandparents and they said they weren't going to grant you permission. And I thought, surely he's not down here. But lo and behold, you're down here. And I just had my hands on the butt of the shotgun like that. I was like, yeah, I think it's time to leave.
What was he doing?
Fishing.
Okay, so just some guy.
And he had just caught this big bass and had it sitting there on a line. Now it's just yeah, you could just put that down right there. I stole the bass and I ate it.
I was going to say, did you put the gun to his head?
No, I did not. I did not point the gun at him. I think the message was relatively clear.
Yes.
And I specifically told him, I don't think there's any reason for this situation to escalate any further. My intentions were relatively clear. Oh, I didn't just bring the gun and the 2 pistols. I also put on the pistol ammo belt for the 6-shooter.
A bandolier?
And a bandolier of shotgun shells.
Why did you do all this, Eric?
Because I thought there was no way he was actually down there, and how funny would it be if I walked up to him looking like fucking Rambo with 4 guns? And he was actually down there. I was like, yeah, he just walked away, and I've never seen or heard from him
is there
again.
not water everywhere down there? Could he not find a different place to fish?
Absolutely.
He absolutely could have. That was part of why I was like, yeah. I mean, technically speaking, that was the 3rd time, I think Mississippi's backwards enough. I might have actually been legally allowed to just kill him. I wasn't going to because that would be terrible, but, now if he'd come back a 4th time after seeing that, at that point, I'm just going to assume he's being hostile because what kind of idiot would come back then? Because obviously, that's no.
He's just squatting on your land.
I don't know. That would be crazy if he came back a 4th time, but I've never seen or heard from him since.
Well, thank you for telling Mike about the time that you threatened a man and told him his fish or his life. You stole a fish from a man at gunpoint. Thank you for sharing that, Eric.
It was my fish.
I appreciated it.
It was my lake. It was my fish.
there any situations like that in Quest 64, Mike? And does Brian ever threaten a man to kill him over a fish?
Lord bless it.
I mean, one of my memes is just Brian standing on a cliff saying, "I've committed several war crimes," and then that was it. Because
that's true of almost any RPG pro tag, though, isn't it? Like, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think throwing a house-sized boulder probably violates multiple clauses in the Geneva Convention and
quite
a bunch
possibly
of other,
If you kill a man with it. You can't kill a guy with a 50 cal in the Geneva Convention. I'm pretty sure you can't kill him with a house-sized boulder.
Oh, I really loved one of the memes that I screenshotted was the one. I actually sent this to my younger brother immediately when I found it.
On your phone?
Yes, I did. It was, "Your Funko Pops will be thrown away when you die." I was just like, oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, a lot of my memes end up being like sort of like freeform jazz, where something just irritates me in the morning, and then I'm like, "Oh, that's a meme now. We're gonna do this for the next 2 hours," and then that's kind of what I do.
So does your life just consist of like being a mailman and then walking around with your phone and then making memes on your phone and then posting them to Twitter?
Yeah, pretty much. And occasionally I'll let my wife look at them. And if I show my wife and she doesn't think it's funny, then I usually post it. If she laughs at it, I'm like, all right, I got to reconsider this now.
You got to know your audience.
And Gen Z says that they can't find a girlfriend. Mike's Quest 64 ass is married. And Gen Z's like, I can't ask a woman out. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw the Quest before like the ring. So, I mean, there's something to be said about Quest 64.
You motherfuckers just aren't trying hard enough.
It's true.
Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you can be as nerdy or whatever. It's fine. Just do something. Try, motherfucker. Try.
Sincerely, then, what does your wife think of the Quest 64 thing? Like, what's her take on it?
She's not involved with it, but she's super supportive of just, hey, go do your thing, whatever makes you happy, that kind of thing. When I talked about like going on shows and stuff, she's like, oh yeah, we'll go out to dinner, have fun, you have the house to yourself, be really loud.
God, Mike with his healthy relationship over here.
Yeah, Mike, your relationship sounds amazing.
I can't ask for anything better. It's really good.
Mike, do you have any hidden talents? Are you a man of many talents, or is it Quest 64 memes all the way down?
No, not talented beyond this. And in fact, I continually say that the reason that my memes and my jokes are the way they are is because I'm not funny and not artistic. And so that's why they have to be like, I used to try to use GIMP and stuff like that, but I just use a meme generator on my phone, like a free one. And every single meme is just like stickers that I've made myself and then slapped over the top of other memes I've made that were not Quest 64 at some point and then changed them for the purposes they have to be now. Like, there is no talent whatsoever, I promise.
So you're telling me you're not like secretly a musician or like a filmmaker or something?
No. I play guitar, but poorly, like as anybody who plays guitar should say.
Can you play like Wonderwall?
Fucking Wonderwall.
I won't, but I can. Yeah.
Good answer. I respect that.
I had to say, I figured when I learned of the Quest 64 Twitter thing, I thought to myself, one of my first thoughts I had about the situation was, I bet this guy behind this just has some like hidden extreme talent and this is just like his off thing that he does. Like, I took you for probably being the Mozart of the modern world who just happens to love Quest 64.
You could not have been further off on that. I don't know how else to sugarcoat that, but no, not at all.
We talked about a couple of like actual things to talk about for the podcast, and if you've listened to the podcast before, you've probably realized that this is mostly what we do more than like actually talking about topics. But we did, I credit where it's due. I tried to come up with at least like 2 or 3 topics for the podcast to have you on. And that was what the themes of Quest 64 were, because I knew that was something that means a lot to you and something you'd be able to speak on. And one of those that you said was it was a coming of age story.
I don't want to say that I'm passionate about it because I think it's actually funnier the other direction. Like, no, there's nothing to this game, But yes, there are themes, from the game. I always thought Quest 64 was coming of age? Because I mean, what other world and towns just like, hey, this brother of hell is going to destroy the entire world, so why don't we send the tiniest kid out to do the toughest job, kind of thing? And then
it's always the 10-year-old apprentice sorcerer, isn't it?
So I thought that it would be fun to try to come up with stories of times when we had coming of age moments ourselves, where we were asked to do something way out of our depth as children, much like the Quest 64 child, who I believe is named Brian. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He's Brian in the States. I guess it depends where our listeners are, because if you played Holy Magic Century, then he's Aaron. That's Pal, like Europe. And then if you played in Japan, he's Jean-Jacques.
Jean-Jacques?
They gave him a French name. Interesting.
Yeah, but only for Japan, because that's what Japanese people like, is French names for their little spirit tamer kids.
Would it be like Jean-Jacques? Have you read the hiragana? What is it? Because there's no way they can say Jean-Jacques.
The Japanese tongue is definitely not used to French any more than mine is, to be honest. But
I mean, like, I know hiragana well enough to, like, I think write Jean-Jacques in hiragana. It'd be like Jean-Jacques, Janu-Jaku or something.
Yeah,
it'd be really bastardized.
This probably won't surprise you, but I've never actually heard somebody from Japan say the name of the game, much like you don't hear anybody talk about Quest 64 around here outside of certain Twitter circles. So I haven't actually tracked down somebody, hey, tell me what you know about Quest 64. Even when I went on Tokyo Game Life show from Japan, he was an import. He was an American guy living in Japan. So it's
wait, what is it called in Japan?
L-Tail Monsters, because of the L-Tail book that's in the thing.
L-Tail Monsters?
Yeah, I actually remember Gerard talking about this. It's got like a different name in every region and stuff. It's actually very unique. It's something kind of unique about this game is the variation in names that it has. And
Quest 64 is such a like American way of like of describing the game too.
It's like the marketing guys were just a little lazy on our end.
They didn't really care.
They were trying to, it's part of the mystique of the game though. They were trying to be, they knew they were going to be the first RPG. So
yeah, they
really leaned into that, and they had to beat Zelda. So so it's just like giving it a name that's completely, splintered down to nothing made perfect sense, because you just wanted people to buy it because it was a, quest, an RPG. Buy it, please.
And to be fair, they did beat Zelda. 100.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I looked at the numbers before,
and it sold well here, even under the terrible name. So I mean, it sold 500,000 copies. So it's not like it wasn't a flop. It outsold, just about every game that came out after 2000.
So you're telling me that there's a chance for a Quest 64 too?
I mean, there is. I'm cautiously optimistic. The idea would be to get Imagineer to say that they still own the licensing to it. That'd be step one, would be to do enough annoying things where they're like, yeah, stop that. Please. You just stop. We shut me down, tell me to be quiet. So I have another friend, Trey, who's making a Quest 64. It's the game, but it's in Unity. But he's building it from the ground up, and we keep posting the videos, and it'd be great if we could if I could give him enough money to make the whole thing. But just as good would be Imagineer telling him to stop.
So wait, so who is Imagineer?
That's a win.
What is the situation with licensing for Quest 64? What is that situation at the moment?
Imagineer is still they're a big video game company. They still make games for the Switch now. They make fitness, boxing, and I don't know what else they've known for, but they used to do big name games like Sim City and stuff like that. They did the publishing and the development of Quest 64 in Japan. They did development for the whole world, but then THQ published it in the States and Konami published it in Europe. So the publishing was all over the place, but Imagineer is the only one that, THQ is gone. There's THQ Nordic now, but those assets have nothing from the 2000s, and Konami doesn't care about anything that's not making, whatever Konami's making now, remakes of Sega games and stuff. But So Imagineer owns anything that would, like, if anybody was going to make it legally, it would either have to be Imagineer making it or selling off the IP to somebody, letting Limited Run do it. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of pathways that could happen, but they're just all very unlikely. But that doesn't stop me, I guess. So,
Well, if anyone's gonna drum up, some excitement for Quest 64, we might be talking to the man.
Yeah,
I mean,
true. So wait, has there been any? And this is a dumb question in kind of general. Has there been any discussion on purchasing the license to Quest 64 with anyone?
Imagineer has like a forum website, like where you can go on there and ask questions. I have my buddy from the Quest Discord, Cow, is a developer, and he has tried to contact them and said, can we just buy it? How much would it be? And they've never gotten back to any of us. Like, I used to send an email a week for a couple years of just like, hey, so what's going on with Quest 64? All right, talk to you next week. And then that was it. But we've never gotten any response. But that's how I made friends with a bunch of, because then it turned into, well, I'm going to go through the credits at the end of the game, and I'm going to start contacting people that were part of the game one at a time until somebody gets back to me, which also has not been helpful. Like, did you
actually get anybody?
That's how I met.
It sounds like you've actually gotten one or two.
A lot of people. So I have met somebody on Twitter whose wife worked on the game, but she's passed away, sadly. And she said nothing but terrible things about the game when she was working on it. Like, this is going to be terrible. I promise you this game is going to flop. And then it didn't. But the husband still, I don't want to use his name and stuff, but the husband was like, I just saw somebody introduced me to the Twitter page. It's really cool that you're doing this. I have fond memories because it's something that was part of my life. He didn't necessarily have fond memories, but that was, one that got away. But I met James Rathkos through messaging. He lives in Michigan next to me, and he wrote the Prima strategy guide for the game.
Oh, he just got it. He's just got it next to him. Of course he does.
I've got a few of them. But he's the one that originally I asked him about. I'm like, all right, I need you to answer like 30 questions about the game. And he's the one that told me once they started writing the strategy guide, which is about 60 to 70% of game completion, they still had 22 revisions to the game from the point where they started writing it to when the game released and the guide came out. And every time they did that, the saves were all corrupted. Like, they didn't go backwards and let the writers keep the saves. So they had to start from the beginning to make sure nothing was changed. And by the time they got to the end of it, the writing team was so burnt out on the game that they just wanted to do anything else. So he's like, so if there's any inconsistencies in there from you fans, I'm sorry, we were done with it. Like,
wow.
But that's how I found out all the development stuff. Like, they had, he said, I still probably have a clip art CD of all the assets from the game. I'm like, can I have it?
Yeah,
and he's
seriously.
like, no. He's like, he's like, that would just be, breaking the non-disclosures that I signed with Nintendo because he worked at the Treehouse too,
right,
with all the other developers and stuff. So
a non-disclosure from 20 years ago.
Hey man, Nintendo protects its assets. They are not
true.
fooling
that's
around.
I was like, yeah. I told him, like, come on, there's no way that they're gonna chase you down for a non-disclosure on a clip art strategy guide. He's like, you'd be surprised. I just can't risk it. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh.
I can see where the guy's coming from, though. I mean, it is Nintendo we're talking about here. They are.
Personally, I just want to say, if there's anyone out there who is an expert in corporate espionage, who maybe their day job just happens to be corporate espionage, if we could get a disc of Quest 64 assets, I know a guy who would pay a pretty penny for them.
I mean, is Nintendo encryption really that, intense from 20 years ago that somebody couldn't just crack open the actual cartridge and just extract that information somehow?
We're decomping the game right now. It's none of the stuff that we want to be on there is on there. So
really?
It's like there used to be multiple playable characters. So if you look at, I have one of the magazines, Game Fan, and then another one, N64 magazine, which is a European one, have articles where they had gameplay of 3 playable characters and a bunch of other stuff that was cut. But that existed at some point, but nobody's got those betas, floating around anywhere, or at least not that we've found yet. But they're not on. They didn't make it to Quest 64. there's been enough digging to know that it's not in there.
You strike me as the kind of guy who uses Cutting Room Floor, the website.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, are you the guy who runs the Quest 64 Cutting Room Floor page?
No.
Okay.
No, that's not me. Once again, untalented, not a writer, and,
Okay.
not good at organizing my thoughts most of the time. So,
Oh, the depth of thought you have on Quest 64 is just impressive. I gotta admit that
Yeah, absolutely.
you know this tale front and back, like inwards and outwards. I am impressed.
Andy's good at telling the story, and
Right?
it's enjoyable to listen to. He makes it entertaining.
I feel like I'm interacting with like a completionist video or something where he's telling the entire history of the game, but we can ask the questions.
Mike, what's something interesting about Quest 64 we haven't talked about yet?
Yes, let's
I know there's
plumb
gotta
the
be
depths
something.
of your Quest 64 knowledge here.
did you guys go? So when you were looking at the game, did you see the? A lot of people don't know about the Game Boy Color games that came along with it.
Yeah, I heard
Did you look
about
at those
that.
at all?
It was briefly mentioned in the completionist video.
I didn't know these existed at all, and I've played Quest 64.
Oh, Brian's Journey. So Quest came out in '98. Brian's Journey came out in 2000. It's a 2D. It's a demake. It's the exact same game, same story, same magic. Everything is the same. They added some like dialogue. They added additional like plot points and story hits to it. But it's the exact same game, and that sold no copies. And then Imagineer also owns the IP to Mr. Do. I don't know if you guys have ever played Mr. Do. It kind of like the original Dig Dug. It's a straight up and down. Yeah, you can look it up while we're talking.
Yeah, I'm
it
gonna
looks
look up
like
Mr. Do.
so it's like a guy at the top of the screen. You dig down in, and then you like fight guys by dropping rocks on them and stuff. So they own the rights to Mr. Do.
I do know what
and
this
all they
is.
did was So they took. If you look up Quest Fantasy Challenge, Imagineer took sprites from Quest and they just slapped them on top of Mr. Do. It's the exact same game. And they just made it a Quest game, and that's the third Quest game is Quest Fantasy Challenge. It's a puzzle game. But those games, neither of those games sold at all. So every time I show somebody, they're like, those don't exist. Did you make these up? And I'm like, no, look, I've got a whole pile of them right here.
Reminds
I
me
can
of
give
the
you one.
history
you
of
want one?
like the Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle thing, how it eventually turned into like Woody the Woodpecker games, and they would just reskin it and like they'd port it from NES to like
that's
Game
exactly what that
Boy,
is.
and then like
This says this
asset
is done by,
flipping, but old school.
This says this was done by Universal, and then one of the cartridges says Black Pearl Software. Are those Imagineer?
Well, there was multiple teams. So for Mr. Do, for example, obviously, so it was Sunsoft actually, but Sunsoft Black Pearl. Imagineer just owned the IP and then owned the rights to those other. So Sunsoft, the rights for Mr. Do, and they just said you're going to do the same game again and put Quest in it, and then that's how Imagineer, flex their muscle on the rights on that.
Imagine getting told that as a software development team, you're going to make the same game again. But you're gonna, then everybody in the office just sighs and like lowers their head and they're like, yes, sir. All right.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, this is for money. You're going to do it.
Yeah,
do you want to
yeah.
get paid? Yes, you do. Yes.
I mean, I guess at least in those situations, much like I said, like it's kind of like old school asset flipping, though,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you can reuse a lot of the program from your last project and just put a different coat of paint on it.
Yeah,
Like,
what you're
you know.
saying is it's the Majora's Mask of Quest 64 games.
Well, no, not at all. No. Majora's Mask used a lot of assets, but they created a whole new game around it. That's like saying that's like Fallout New Vegas compared to Fallout 3. Yeah, they used a shit ton of the assets, and they made it in half the time, and it was twice as good.
Yeah.
And 3 times as buggy. But but this is how the history of video games work. Development, cost, cutting corners. There's a lot of interesting stories you can get from it.
I was thinking about today about
Like
how
Quest 64.
Like Quest 64. I was thinking today specifically about how interesting it is that Tears of the Kingdom, the new Zelda game. Well, I guess it's not that new anymore, but
Newest.
it seems like
newest.
yeah, the newest. It seems like we're dating the podcast now, aren't we? God, it seems like they made all of the assets in Breath of the Wild, and then they just basically made an entirely new game. They made the game in Tears of the Kingdom. It was almost like Nintendo has this habit of making a bunch of assets, slapping it together to kind of make like what I guess they consider a demo of a game. Then they sell it for $60. It's a bestseller, number one on all the lists. And then they turn around and they go, okay, yeah, let's just do it again and use all the assets and make the actual game we wanted to make this time.
Yeah, let's finish it.
Yeah, let's finish it.
Second time.
And then it sells hotcakes again. They sell it for $60. It's number one of all the lists.
That's Nintendo when it comes to first party games, man. Like they put their money and their developers forward. They do reuse assets, but they reuse assets right after they tested them and realized people were consuming them like cocaine.
Yeah.
You know? Like, they're not dumb.
They're not reusing terrible game assets. They're reusing the cash cow assets because that's how you make more money.
Exactly.
That's why they didn't make, they didn't request another Quest game because, they made enough money. They're like, well, that's not going to work again.
Yeah.
No one's arguing that Majora's Mask is just the same game as, Ocarina of Time. There's like, no, I love this. This is great. Sure. It still feels familiar. It's easy to pick up after you finish Ocarina of Time, but you don't feel like you were just handed Ocarina again.
I have a question, I guess, just for the table, since Mike, you're a video game conservationist, and Eric, you like video games. Are you guys familiar with the story of how Shrek came to be in DreamWorks? Where
no,
okay, so it's very quick. Basically, Shrek was the side project at DreamWorks. They were making The Prince of Egypt at the time. And then if you acted up in the office and then you weren't performing at the way that they wanted you to, you would get sent to work on Shrek. And it was called in the office Getting Shreked. And which is ironic because Getting Shreked became like a meme after the movie came out. But they would say, well, you're getting Shreked, you're going to go work on Shrek. And then, of course, Shrek came out and it sold absolute hotcakes. It was amazing.
Wow, your D team made your AAA.
Yeah. And I wonder what is the video game equivalent of that? Has there been a video game historical equivalent of like the game that people got removed from the main party game to, and then the main party game just outsold the main game by massive margins?
I don't know. It usually works the opposite way.
Isn't that how Treasure came to be? The company Treasure? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Treasure games,
that
right?
That doesn't like ring any bells to me.
On the N64, they made Bang Hi-Oh, they made Mischief Makers, and they made Sin and Punishment, which ended up being a great game. But they're a team of 8, and I swear that the story goes that they were just people getting ostracized from other video game companies. And in Japan, there's a culture where if you're going to do stuff, like if you're going to do side projects, they want you to use a completely different name, or even if you're working on something main, they want you to not use your real name because there was a huge culture of poaching. Like, oh, Ocarina of Time did really well. We want to poach that music designer or that asset designer or that artist. So every company was making the same person use 5 and 6 different names, and somehow I thought the story went that the developers of Treasure got together on accident doing side projects, and then that's how they formed their company. I mean, it's not quite the same. It's not like they were all the D team of like Nintendo EAD or something like that, but they ended up making some really great games in a tiny Shrek-sized team, I guess. But
still a very interesting story about how all that crisscrossing and pseudonyms ended up with people randomly running into each other and thus creating a random treasure out of nowhere.
Have you ever made?
Oh wait, I just got that.
Have you ever played Mischief Makers, Eric?
I have not. No.
Oh yeah, I didn't figure. Since you didn't own an N64, I didn't imagine you would. Mischief Makers rules.
No,
we gotta play Mischief Makers at some point.
I'm fine with that.
That's an odd thing as far as Japanese company culture goes as well. When it comes to working at a company in Japan, you can't. Well, the culture goes basically you can't get fired. You're not going to get fired from a company in Japan. You will get there's a word for it. It's called like window sitting or something, where they will place you next to a window and then give you no work and then never talk to you, never do anything, interact with you whatsoever, and then expect you to quit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are there like professional window sitters who just waste time at their companies?
Yes.
I knew it. I knew that would be a thing.
Yes.
Yep.
So maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe that didn't happen in video games because so many video games came out of Japan, and Japan just kind of has that culture of they're not going to fire you anyways. I don't imagine the window sitters very much getting together and making their own video game.
Well, it's also like damn near illegal to be homeless in Japan. Like panhandling is illegal and begging is illegal and all sorts of stuff like that.
It's damn near illegal to be homeless in America.
Depends on where you are.
Yeah.
But yeah.
In Mississippi, we don't like them too much. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, but everything's so spread out that there's like, space, I guess. To
You're
where
right. When homeless people show up in
spots.
Mississippi, they go to our lakes and then we show up with a bunch of guns and we tell them they have to leave. Their fish are their life.
No, that man was not homeless.
All right. Yep. I think we've been going long enough for a single episode. Mike, would you like to record another one?
Yeah, I'm free for another 2 to 3 hours. Yeah, if you need.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Would you mind if I stepped out and smoked a cigarette real quick? Then you guys could chit chat.
Yeah. Go right
ahead.
ahead.
Even keep recording, and I'll just.
You just chop all the best parts out of this. It doesn't have to be start to finish. I can say some really outrageous stuff that will force you to edit it if you want, and then.
If you've listened to the podcast before, it's likely that I won't cut it out at all. It'll just be outrageous.
We'll see about that. Personal addresses and racism incoming.
Anyways, this has been the AnythingCast. I'm Patrick. This is Eric.
I'm Eric.
Our guest, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for coming on the show. We'll see you guys next week.